Okay, so last week's homework, right? The let me just remember again, because I've been looking at next week's homework, so my brain is a bit messed up now. Yeah, okay. I think I remember now. Yes, so the first exercise was something called booking flights, something, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Is it visible? It's very bright, right? Because of that window. Well, I don't know if this helps at all. But yeah. Well, the first, I divided into two parts because there was a, let's say, first part and then an enhancement of the second one. But I saw that most of you did everything in one function, and again, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I just wanted to do so that I could show the flow, basically. So it was basically a function that gives you the full name, giving in first and last name, right? And yeah, in this first part, I just had a function that has two arguments, two parameters, and it just concatenates them with a space in between, so it prints it in a nice way. And yeah, and here giving it a first name, last name, first name, last name, and the constant log of these ones should give you marginal things and bitter part. The second part was to have a flag, a boolean in this case. I'm not sure how it's mentioned, but I think it said some sort of a flag or something. That if it's true, it should in a formal way of having word something. So yeah, I did exactly the same. I have the same. Of course, I changed a different name because of everything is on this scope. Things will get messed up if it will be the same name. And I have the same return first name, last name in this case. But if use formal is true here, then it returns this one. Now in here, something we mentioned last week, I could have an else and then return, but because there is no other case, I don't really need an else. I have this if, and if this one is true, because it returns, it does not execute anything else. If, of course, this one is false, I think the second one, Peter Parker, is false, then it doesn't go inside of this block and returns whatever we actually did before. It's the same thing. Now, actually, on your homework, I saw that some of you, for instance, and that's not, I don't know if it's something I did not explain, but here in between the double quotes, it's a string. So you can have whatever you want in there. You can actually have a space in there. So you don't need to create a space like we are doing here after this string. You can do it, there's nothing wrong with it, of course. But you can have space here, you can have space if you have a space before. Also prints out that space. Let's actually open up this somewhere. Where is it? Here. I should have opened it before, but okay. So in here I have all the output of the homework. So you can, maybe I should zoom in. We are only looking at these first ones, so you can try to ignore the rest. So for instance, actually in here, there is quite a lot of spaces, as you can see. If you, I don't know if it's that visible, but if you try to select with the mouse, I can select 1, 2 spaces. It means that I have 2 spaces somewhere. And yeah, that's actually because I'm doing something I also did not explain. I'm using a comma here instead of a plus. You can actually do that. And let's actually have a look at that now. So this, as you know, this sums or concatenates whatever string this one have, which is my full name, plus this string, right? So now if I refresh, in here you can see full name 1, Mark Martinez, which is my name, but then Peter Parker has quite of a space, the higher space in between, and that's actually because I use the comma here, and that's because actually the console log, it's a function, so it actually accepts a lot of parameters if you send to it. And I was sending one string plus another string, so it actually made it a bit far apart, and that's actually a mistake of mine. I should correct that because it's just because I'm very used to do this, so I put a comma. It should be a plus. So yeah, now everything only has one space in between. Now what I wanted to show is in this large part here. So I have a space after, but if I would have a space before, it actually prints out that space as well. So for instance, you would not need to do this. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with it. Even in terms of processing memory, whatever, like it is a bit overkill, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that this can be translated into this. It's exactly the same thing. Because you can have as many spaces and letters and then more spaces, and if you have 100 spaces, it should print them. Let's actually see if it does. Yeah.
But just doing two variables is not possible.
Yeah, exactly. If you have, in this case, first and last name, there is no other way of doing it because, yeah, because there isn't.
And if I want to print each one in a new line, what I should add?
Yeah, in new line in a console log, actually I'm not sure.
It's a backslash.
Yeah, it should be something like, where is it in my keyboard now? Yeah. Yeah, it should be the other slash that now I cannot find it here. Backslash, yeah. It's because my keyboard for some reason does not have backslash. So I need to copy. Yeah, that's the tricky part of having a Mac.
I'll go between English and Danish tastature.
Yeah. So now here you can see that in between my first and last name, put it in another line.
Okay.
So yeah. Actually, I will comment this out and I'll leave it here just for reference whenever you guys have a look at it. Now I'll leave this one here and come on.
But I want to go to that HTML file and I use the command inherit.
What do you mean?
When you take it to build it up in the HTML, you use the command document something. So document get file by ID and inherit it, and then how you make the new line here.
The new line, for instance, if you want a new line per file, you would have to have a console log at the end. For instance, in here at the end of this file, if I have a console log.
No, I don't mean about console log in this file. I mean that I want to print that in the HTML file where it should on the web page. Where I use that document get file by an ID, I think was the command. And then you have that inherited.
What do you mean? No, on the HTML in here, we are only importing like this.
Yes, I understand that, but for example, if I want to print that name on the HTML.
Oh, yes.
You use the command inherited, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay. If you want to print the name on the HTML with a new space, then you need to use the HTML for it. Either the BR, the /BR, that makes a break point, or in that case, you should actually use styles for it instead.
Okay,
because in here, this would be only for the scripting part, only for.
Yeah, I get it here.
Yeah.
I understand it, but there, in the HTML, when I want to show it in the website.
Yeah, that you should not use the JavaScript for that.
No.
That you should, if you want to have things like in in the new line or something like that, you should always use styles for it,
Okay.
if possible, of course. Because using JavaScript for it can be tricky. Again, as I showed you last time, JavaScript comes after the website being loaded. So, and again, in here it's very hard to see, but the reason why the console blinks a little bit is because when we open a website, we are opening the HTML, right?
Yeah.
And the HTML is all this. And this, the browsers just ignore it. They just say like, comes at whatever time they want. Because some files can be huge, can be insanely big. And that will take a lot of processing time of the browser. So the browser is responsible to show all this and to load all those files. So imagine that if you want to have a lot of text here that comes from JavaScript. That text might take a long time to appear if the user has a very slow connection, for instance. If you are on 3G, it loads the website perfectly fine, and then the JavaScript takes forever to come in because it needs to load the file and load everything into the browser. That's why a lot of times when you open a website on your mobile phone and you are on 3G, if it's slow, it's because the website is full of JavaScript. That's the reason why. But one of the, not the main reason why, but one of the reasons why. Yes?
But in order to word this form or this make it easier, isn't it better to keep all the scripts
At the bottom.
at the bottom?
Yes.
In the body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in here we have the scripts in the same place where we have the, I forgot the name, CSS. Yeah, and but in order to avoid that, if of course you have a very big JavaScript file, again, once we reach React is a very big framework, kinda. People have a lot of discussions about that, but it is very big. It's very heavy for a website. So it's no good to be loaded at the beginning, as Christian is saying, that because again, that might take forever for your website to load. Like it's trying to load everything that is inside of the JavaScript library. So if you have it at the end, then yeah, that makes the website faster. But again, if your website needs all that JavaScript to run, it's complicated for the user won't get happy because of it. But yeah, if you want to manipulate visual things, as hard as it might be, and that's something, again, I'm not a CSS fan, but we should try to use styles for it. And I hate to use styles for it, but that is a thing, that if you want to manipulate names or things to go into a new line, it should be like that. Because again, in here, in the JavaScript part, what we care is about scripting, is about manipulating things, like giving different names to names, giving numbers to numbers, not really presenting. Like JavaScript should not, at this point where we are right now, JavaScript should not care about presenting stuff. But yeah, actually in here now I'm adding a new line at the end of the file, and because I'm loading 4 files, I'm not sure how many of them. Yeah, a bunch of them. So whenever this full name gets printed, at the end there is a new line. So in here actually you can see that I'm separating. This would actually be a nicer way to show my code, so maybe I should use it from now on. I'm actually separating this, the exercise number 1 to the exercise number 2. Yeah, and about the exercise number 1 was basically, I mean, in here what was asked is basically to see how to describe a function and the parameters of the function, and then of course having a concatenation of 2 strings, in this case 3 strings, because this is a string. And yeah, and then have one with if something is true, it prints out the formal version. If not, continues to the next one. Now, I think this one was simple. I don't know if you had big questions about it. Yeah, I can open it like this. The event application, this one could be a little bit tricky because the date function, dates in programming is, I think it's safe to say right now at your level, dates is the hardest thing to understand because every single programming language has a date function that gives you the date, but that date is never really, most of the times is not what you need for the specific exercise or problem in real work, whatever you're working on. Date might be complex. And I left here the URL for the documentation of the date method, let's say. So yeah, by doing new date with parentheses, and you always need to use those parentheses, this D now gets the whole object of date, whatever is inside of that. And if you actually try to console log, oh come on, today, let's actually put the space here. Can I know? I don't know where's the key. Oh, come on. Let's just print out that just to understand what we get from it. So we got all that thing. This is the date. Whenever we say new date, and in here I called it today because every time you call new date, it gives you the whole time of right now, actually. So in here we even have the seconds. So if we keep refreshing, things of course change because time goes on, right? But as you can see, there is like Sunday, June 02, 2019, then the time, then the, what's this called, the location time? And
the time zone.
Yeah, time zone, yeah, and then the full length time zone. Yeah. So this is useless information. Like we never in a day of work we want to show this to anyone. No one wants to see this whole thing unless you have a flight. I think that's the only times where you need this thing. Yeah, that's why the
satellite somewhere.
Yeah, that's why whenever you have that. Now I have this today, and now inside on this today I have a lot of functions I can call, and those functions are described here. So yeah, this gets you, and I mean in here the documentation is quite good. So you can get like full here, you can get month, and of course month comes from numbers starting in 0 to 11, date, and yeah, it's the. Again, it's a weird thing to ask because it should be day, I think, but day is a different thing. Because date is day of the month, and day is the index of the day of the week. And yeah, and this one would actually be the best one for this exercise to use, again, in my opinion, because we could have, again, I'm not sure if I'm talking it wrong or not. Yeah, they don't give it. Because if we would have an array with all the days of the week, like our days of the week, because again, as you see, it gives you something Sunday, but that sometimes you want to show in different languages as well, so it's useless again. So in here, I mean, if you would want to write in your own language, you also could do that, and yeah, you also, in this case, you would have to know what's 0 means in their documentation. And I don't know if I found it here or I found it somewhere. So if we search for get day, yeah, okay, yeah. So on the get day method, on their documentation, they actually say that the first day, 0, means Sunday. And this is something you have to know, of course. I mean, if you read the documentation, it's there anyway.
Sometimes it depends when you want the week start.
Yeah, exactly. Because for me, in my culture, week starts at Monday, never on Sunday. But again, in the programming world, most of the times is on Sunday. I'm not sure if I'm saying something wrong. In JavaScript, it is.
We started Saturday.
Yeah. So that can change a lot. And again, if you want to write this on your own language, if you need to build a website for some other country, this is something you really need to pay attention. Dates and time zones, and that's like the most painful thing on programming. But yeah, in here I just choose to get what day of the week it is today based on a week I described here. So the week starts on Sunday, ends on Saturday, and we have the today date. So yeah, in here I'm getting the day, and now in here, if we say get day on this console, now I should get 0, right? Yeah, because it's Sunday. And then I just sum how many days did the user gave us to calculate in what day of the week it is. So it's Sunday, if we give 2, then it should go 2 times 2 indexes forward on that array. And then I'm just printing out when in what exact day of the week the event is, basically. And of course, this index in here gives, I think it's probably Wednesday or Tuesday, yeah. And that was, I mean, again, from one thing that I actually liked from your homework is that all the solutions were different. Because again, there is a lot of ways to achieve this, of course. Sometimes you might think like, oh, but I wrote a lot of code, maybe I could have wrote just a little bit, but it's okay to write a lot of code. It gives, if it gives the same result, it's completely fine.
Yeah, you showed it with 2 lines of code. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It took me the whole page.
Yeah, but again, it that also brings up the, again, agility that you can have, and you can train and try to solve it even in a different way. For me sometimes, and that's, again, I do these type of things a lot of times, I get a bit, for me it's hard now to just try to figure out another way to solve it, because I already know the answer, so maybe but that's something you should try to force yourselves a little bit, like, can I do it a bit more simple or not? And if not, that's fine, then there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, in here, in these exercises, I'm actually doing 2 things that I told you not to do. So inside of the function, I'm actually manipulating both the today and the week that are outside of the function. That last week I said that everything should be in the scope of the function. So in here I'm doing something wrong. I can change that. Maybe I should. Maybe I will change that. And that's something that you can always question yourself, and you should question yourself when you see like something, the result, like the output, is correct. So can I change something on it without messing up the output, of course, without messing up what's the desired outcome? And 2 things that I actually mentioned last week that I didn't do on this exercise is this, and actually the return, because this function is not returning anything. So now we can actually do this, and I would consider this more correct. Come on. Oh, I forgot something. Sorry, this should go there. Right. Yep. Does it still show the same result? Yeah, Tuesday. So now actually I did what I asked it to do last time, which was the function now only needs one thing to give me the number. Only needs that number of what day from now is it. Because before, if we would have moved the function itself somewhere else, some other file, nothing would work, because the date was not there, the week days were not there, and it didn't return anything. So yeah, this is a more correct way. And
but if you add like 10 days, would you like not give a mistake and define? Then it will become out of the array.
Yes.
That's why I make a module in my exercise.
That's a good point. That's something I didn't talk about it when I did. Let me just try that. What happens when let's say 12, because this is a valid, and yes, this should give me something wrong. Right, yeah, it says undefined. So yeah, in that case, yeah, and you use the module of the date.
The length of the array.
Module 7. I'm making module 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is, okay, so for instance, if we now console log the day here, and console log the day module 7, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where is it? Okay, so this one gives us 2, and this one gives us 5. So actually, we should have used this solution here. Okay. Oh, come on. Right? Yes. So in this case, where is it? Friday. That might be correct, I guess. So yeah, that is a very good point. That I didn't thought about that. I should have thought about that definitely. Yeah. So in here, I was actually only considering adding maximum 7, depending, yeah, what day. Actually, we are lucky that today is Sunday. So if today would be Friday already and we would add 2, then it would already be undefined. So yeah, this would be a very good solution. That's actually a very good point. And again, that is a question. Sometimes you have to trick yourselves into figuring out how can I break my own code.
Yeah.
And
I did this one. What I have done, I just defined a variable, and I make the array with the index, and I put everything inside, where I say that the today day plus the date and all the root 7. So it gives me the index, the right index from the array.
yeah. Yeah, but again, for this type of problems, there can be a lot of solutions, and some solutions can have a lot of lines of code, less lines of code, and again, and I've been programming for a while now, and sometimes a very small amount of code might not be the most ideal, because you might look at it and not understand what are they trying to do with that tiny function. Like, I don't get it. And sometimes having a more length with ifs and like special cases, people can actually read and understand, like, oh, now I get what this means. And again, don't be afraid to write a lot of code to solve a small problem, because that is programming on a nutshell, basically. And yeah, of course, bringing up all these problems of, can I throw an undefined on this array? And I mean, that's honestly something I did not even consider it or thought about it when I was doing this. So yeah, that's perfectly good point. What? Come on. Oh yeah, that was the event application, right? Now the weather where, right? This was something to calculate or to compare temperatures, I think. And what did it said? Yeah, it's something that giving temperature, it should tell you what to wear, right? So yeah, I wrote a small function, and then I'm just logging the result of that function, giving temperature of 8 degrees, 18 degrees, and 28 degrees. And yeah, it takes a temperature as an input, as an argument, parameter. And then I just have a bunch, 3 encapsulated if statements, where it compares if it's less than 10. It returns, yeah, we need a winter jacket for that, probably. And then I'm using an else if, because I want to have, I mean, this was my choice. I don't think the exercise mentioned that, but this was my choice, just to have a mid temperature, and then from there on, yeah, it's summer, so whatever. That's maybe not true in Denmark anyway. So in here, not this year. So in here, I'm just comparing if it's bigger or equal than 10 and smaller than 20, then it's warmish. We need to still wear something warmish like spring things. Otherwise, return is this. Now in here, of course, you can have as much as you want, right? We can have an else if from 5 to 10, from
It's up.
in this type of exercise, it's up to you to practice. I mean, honestly, you can have like 400 lines of comparison if that's something that you feel like. Again, it might be a bit tricky if something fails, where to fix it. but yeah, I mean, this exercise was basically just to use these operators, the bigger than, smaller than, equal. And of course, if you would want to use something in between two temperatures, then we need to use the and, or in this case would be and all the time. So yeah, this exercise was simple, I think. Right, it was. Then the student manager, I think this one might have been a bit more tricky. Yeah, I have a lot of console logs on this one because
You need to check for
yeah, you need to check if the class is bigger than something, then shows this, if whatever. So let's just have a small look here. This exercise was actually broken into smaller parts, let's say. And in here, okay, let's ignore that for now. So yeah, there was an array of students, empty, right? And then of course I had the queen name here that at some point it has, the queen always has the right to be in classes, even if the class is bigger than something. And this exercise was a good, I think, exercise to test what you mentioned about like try to break your own code. Like, can I throw out errors on my own code after it's done? That's something I did not do in my code, honestly, to be honest about. But yeah, of course, if the value, if that's empty, we cannot have an empty to the array. And this is actually something, this first part here is something that you will, once you start to implement more, like, let's say bigger applications, it's something we really need to think about. It's always to validate what we get. Because for instance, an exercise like this, imagine that you're building just a function for someone else to use, and you build a function without checking if this is empty. Then that person just sends a bunch of empty values just because the code allowed it to do it. So then you'll add a lot of empty seeds to the array, and that of course, it's a bug, it's an error. So this is a good thing, that always validate whatever people give to you in your function. This is a way of doing it, of course. I mean, if you're asking for a number, of course you need to make sure if the number cannot be negative, you should check that. If the number cannot be 0, you should check that. But again, that's up to whatever problem you have to solve, of course. So yeah, checking the inputs, it is a very important thing. Yeah, and this was basically where, yeah, at the end I'm actually inputting the student name into the class 7 students array, which yes, it is out of the function, but that's how they gave to us in the exercise. And I'm using the push method that just pushes things inside of the array. Whatever comes here, whatever name we get here, we push it inside of the array. Again, when you're looking at this, I could have actually sent numbers in there as a student name, and then it pushes it, because I'm not checking for numbers, I'm just checking is it empty. So this is something, again, that was not part of the exercise, but it's something you can, of course, think about. Yeah, if it's the queen, if the name that comes in is exactly the same as the queen, we push no matter what. And actually, I have a bug on my own code, just noticed, because actually this if should be after this if, because this one checks, is the student already in class? And if so, you should not have the student. So this means that I can actually add the clean twice, or 3 times, or 4 times, or 100 times, because the clean doesn't care if we have maximum 5 students or not. So this is actually what I have here. Okay, we should fix it. And
But how you check it? I can't get it, this one.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll go.
Yeah, because I use the other functions, like it's included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, on this if we are, I'll go back to that one.
Yeah.
On this if we are just checking the length of the class.
Yeah.
I think after on the exercise there was something to create a function to give us the number of students. So this was dumb for me to do that here. I could actually use this function there, but yeah, I did it after, whatever. So, and then there was a part that asked us to that the same student not be added to the class. So in here, I'm actually asking for the index of the array with this name. So for instance, if I send my name, Marco, and the name is not there, it comes all the way down here, it added, and then I add it again. So this one basically goes through the whole array, and it checks, do we have, give me the index of this, of something with this value. And then the result of that one, depending on the result of that one, we can see does this exist on the array or not. We can also use other methods, of course, to calculate it. And then yes, we just need to print out this error. Now, we can have a look of this method. That's actually part of this class, the index of. So let's just...
Because index always give, I think, the number.
Yeah, the index of the array.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you like...
What's inside?
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it does not tell you what's inside.
No.
JavaScript index of. It's this one here. Where do we have more examples? Yeah, again, this one is only with strings. Let's find arrays. Yeah, array. Yeah, I mean, this example here. So we have an array with a lot of fruits, and then on that one, we want the index of apple, and it's going to tell us 2, because it's 0, 1, 2.
Yeah.
So this one is to figure out the index of the array with this exact value. And that's a way to check does something exists there or not, basically. But in JavaScript,
why you use like it's not equal to -1? Why you don't say like,
yeah. Wait a bit.
Because indexes will never be -1, I think.
No.
It means it's not there.
Yeah, that's when it means it. For instance,
-1 is false, 1 is true. Isn't it?
not in this case, because in this case I'm asking if it's different from -1. So it means that it is there. So for instance, if we down here console log, actually let's do it. Where should we do it? Inside, yeah, because inside we will see the value of the console log. And let's just give this whole shebangs here. So now when student something is already in class. So yeah, in this case, I need to see what I'm sending. I have a lot of values being sent. Delete all this. Why is it printing the other ones? Oh, because sorry. I need to figure out exactly where I'm printing it.
The number of the line.
value, this one, value 0. Yeah, okay, it gives us 0 in this case. This one might be a little bit easier to understand. So bison is there, giraffe is not there. Yeah, how to explain it? So yeah, when you have an array of things, in this case, names, in this case we have all those animals in there. And when we are asking for the index of something, for instance, if we ask for an index of bison, it gives us a 1 because it's there. Yeah, this is where the index starts from. This one we can ignore for now. It's not really that useful. If we would ask for the index of n, it will give us 0. And when you think about, if I want to make sure that something is not there, what would be the number for it? It's a bit tricky, right? Because 0 is a number of the array. It is an index here. It cannot be 0. It cannot be 100 because we don't know how big this is. So the number -1 was chosen. That was basically it. Because an array cannot have minus items, basically. And that was one of the reasons why, if you ask for, if this value is different than -1, then it means it is there. So in this case, that I'm doing here, it goes to the whole students and gets the index of, for instance, Margaret, right? And if it's there, then it's going to give us either 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 100. So it's never -1. But if, and then it goes inside. But if the name is not there, then no. If the name is not there,
Not there.
not -1, then it keeps going on and it just adds the name. There. But yeah, there is simpler ways to do that. The problem, I think, is the JavaScript version again. Now I need.
Because like I told you, use include.
Wait. Array includes. Is it include or includes? Includes. Yeah, this one gives you true or false. It doesn't give you a number, or it's a Boolean that you can use. And let me just have a look. But I think this is. Yeah, this should be. This is also okay to use. Like, it's completely fine to use the includes. Again, in here, I can actually write it. Not there. Come on. So in here we can say if it includes, then we throw that error that the student is already in class. And as I said before, I have an error here. I will move this all the way up there. Because again, in this case, I don't think it would make sense to put if, else if, because none of them are really related to each other. We are not comparing names, we are not comparing number ranges or anything. So it is okay to have separate ifs for separate cases. Again, the order really matters, and I had an error, because if the queen was already added once, I could have added 100 times the queen. And actually, it should go even one more, kinda, not really. No, because it will already fail here, yeah. So, in this case, if I add the queen twice, it won't allow me to, because it will compare, she's already there, don't add it. But it had also the case if the number of students cannot be bigger than 5. So if it's bigger than 5, the queen can still go. So this one should come on first, because if the class is full, then the queen should still be added. And then of course at the end, this is the what's it called, a happy scenario, which means that there's nothing wrong with the array. It's not full, it's not a clean, and the user is not there yet, and we just push it inside. And yeah, and as I told you before, I could actually have done this, I think. Yeah, so this function is not perfect because I'm adding it a number and I shouldn't. So we can actually try that. New then string, right? This should give us an error. No, not yet. Is it string or string? Nope. We can just see what it gives us. Okay, number, it is string. Well, let's isn't like this. Well, this one is tricky. So this one is a number. So if it's or, not and, maybe. Yeah, that was the problem. So yeah, I was doing an and, so it had to be empty and different than string. That's physically impossible. So yeah, now it solved it. So now I'm saying an empty string or a number, just so that the user knows what is doing. And yeah, in this case is a bit more safe in terms of user usage, so you cannot add a number to it. And yeah, and then again, I'm not sure why this was part of the exercise. Maybe just because was to have the function as a way to calculate the length. Of course, that in here I would prefer to actually have a input array and then do this input array here, so that actually now this function can be used for anyone to actually calculate the length of an array. Because before it was dependent of something that exists all the way up here, right? And yeah. But again, to be honest, this was just an exercise for you to write stuff. But if you ever find yourself writing functions like this, so a function that takes in something, in this case an array, and then what it does is that gets the length of the array. This is not really necessary, because then just call this. I mean, there is a method that gives you the length of the array. Why we need a function? Like, we are not doing anything else, right, except this. Then I would tell them just to do this. Because, again, we should not reinvent the wheel, right? We should improve the wheel, but not reinvent it. So if it's exactly a wheel, no, I don't think it's needed for something like that. Then the last part was candy. Where was it? Yeah, and this one was optional to do. Yeah, and it's something to calculate if you can buy more, right? Yes. Let me just read a little bit the exercise again. Okay. Yeah, okay, so this one was divided into two functions, one to add candies to the candy prices to the array, and then the other one to check if you can buy more candy. So, yeah, and this one, again, this one I choose to divide into several ifs, but we could have else if as well, because we're actually comparing the candy type all the times. We are not, in this case I call it candy type, of course. So yeah, I could have used an else if, and I don't have any safety as well. So if the user sends something that we don't understand, we just basically ignore it because, yeah, we ignore it. Yeah. Again, we could have a return down here or a console error, something all the way down here saying like, yeah, we don't recognize whatever you're sending to us. But yeah, in this case, I choose not to. It was not part of the exercise.
But in this case, like the input should be like a checkbox, so the user cannot add something from his mind.
Yeah.
So you don't need the safety, the last one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of times whenever we are building some functions to calculate something,
yeah,
we can and we should also sometimes assume that our users are not that dumb or that stupid to do messed up things, but sometimes they are, and sometimes people can figure out stuff and break our code. That's one of the reasons why people always say that we should check for what comes in. Like, so that we are sure that nobody can break our code, even though like it's their fault to do something completely wrong, but it's our code, so it's our little baby that we should take care of. But yeah, it's completely understandable that we say like, yeah, but we are only supporting this, and you should know that by default. That's also why in here I didn't put any check or anything, because again we wanted to compare types, like there was sweet, chocolate, coffee, and chewing gum. Yes, I think that was the types. And then different types have different prices per weight. So yeah, I just had a constant price on each if. Again, as you know, we cannot define the same constant in the same scope. But in here, it's never the same scope, because in each if, like, we can never have both, right? So this cost price will never clash with each other. So we won't get any warnings or errors or anything. But it is something, of course, you should pay attention, because we can make sure that only comes here if this name has that name. So this one, and this one won't clash with anything. So that's a safeguard. And then of course I'm pushing whatever price I calculated based on the weight. And this price was given on the table. Yeah. Again, we could improve this code, of course, can always. Again, sometimes improve might be a wrong word. It doesn't mean that it's bad, but it can be changed. And that's something I try to do sometimes when I see code, and can I do a different way? But again, it's perfectly fine. If you choose one version of it, stick with it. And yeah, of course, in here, in my dream world, this array should not be outside, should be passed as a property and then used here and returned. So that's something I could definitely improve. I would do that instead of having a function that modifies something that is outside of the function. I personally don't like that. I always like to have the function. Again, if this file starts to get big, we could easily move the function somewhere else. Right now, we can't. It's very tight to the file. And that's the reason why I always like to think on atomic functions, like things that
can be moved around and nobody misses them if they are moved around from here. But yeah, in this case, I choose to do this way, of course. And yeah, and then down here, I just added 10 of the weight. I'm not sure if it was grams or something of each of them. And then we have a function. We were asked to make a function of can I buy more candy? And this one should return a true or false if we can buy more candy or not. So I'll put it here and then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So this function, can I buy more candy or can buy more candy, should return true or false. When I started typing the function, the first thing I did actually was to write function and then return false, actually. And then, yeah, okay, I should have a variable for this value, and then I set the value to false. And again, that's, and it's my personal choice. It's not something I learned, it's something that I learned by myself doing it at some point. Every time I build a function that is true or false, I always define it to return false no matter what. And then we build the happy path. Then we build like, yeah, how do we return true? So by having this variable here, can I buy more equals false, and then we return it down here. Let's now ignore all these things. So this function returns false, right? And that's already handled. So if I can't, it's handled. So yeah, then I start right, like we have to calculate something that should start at 0, right? The total, how much price, how much money I'm spending. And because somewhere else we added stuff to an array of the candy prices. So now in here we loop through the array, as we learned last week. We start at 0, we go until the end of the array, which is the length, and we go one step at a time to get the index. And now I'm just doing this thing that we also mentioned last time. So total equals total plus the value. And that can be shortened by total plus equals the value. And by value, I mean give me the value of the index of that array. And then down here, I'm just logging this just to make sure that the things are there. Because I think down there I was not checking. Like this was just for debugging purposes to see what was going on. So the amount to spend, I think it's calculated all the way up. It's just a random. We also mentioned this last week. So I'm getting a random number times 100, just to get a random number. I think that was also given by the exercise, not sure now. And then every time we call this function, of course it calculates the total, and then we just check, is the total minus that lesser than the amount that I have to spend, and if so, then give this guy the true flag, and then it goes all the way down here and does that. And again, it could be changed. We could have the return here, actually. We could have return true here. That would be perfectly fine. We could move things around a little bit. We could improve it a little bit, but yeah, this is basically, again, I would prefer to send in the array as a parameter than to actually call this thing but that's the thing that I've been mentioning all the time. But I only made it because the exercise actually mentioned this, so yeah.
But does the come buy more candy function know the array?
No, I mean it knows because the array is defined all the way at this level, like all the way up there, and I'm using it here.
Okay.
So, for instance, the array is
Inside the
this. Oh, it's this one here that it's highlighted now. So the array is that one. Again, as I say, like I would prefer to have the array here as a parameter. I would prefer to have this here and then calculate it inside of the function. So we send in everything to it. But in order to do that, for instance, and we can do that right now, let me just figure out where I have to change it. Here. And then I need to pass it whenever I call the function. So in here, I need to do this. So now the function can buy more candy takes in an array of bought candies. And they are here, and of course, then it just calculates and actually, let's just do something else. So I am very happy now. So now even the amount spent is here. So the function now is independent, kinda, of the outside world, because of course we need this function to add candies to the array, but that's not the responsibility of this one. This one gets an array, and it's ignoring what's happening outside of the world. And again, in my opinion, that's how function should be. Because right now we can move this anywhere else, and things would still work. Of course, we need to make sure we send in an array with prices to them, so that it calculates. But if the array is empty, it will return true, because the total will always be lesser than that. So it will say like, yeah, you can buy more. I mean, there's nothing there. You can buy as much as you want right now. So this function right now, the way that we rewrote it a bit, it is movable. Again, you can copy and paste it somewhere, and the function still works. Because now we are just sending in this. Of course, if you send an array with names instead of prices, then you're screwed. Then nothing works.
Yeah.
But again, and as you say, we should assume that whenever somebody calls this, knows what they're calling.
What are they calling again?
Yeah.
I have a question here, Armando.
Yeah.
I use something called reduce.
Reduce?
Yeah.
You can use that, but that's not for now.
Because I use it, but I don't understand how because I think from other websites. But it's confusing me more.
Reduce is a bit confusing for now. For this level, it's too confusing. Even for me, it's confusing. So it is a bit confusing, reduce. Let me just, okay, we can actually have a look at that. Is this the last exercise of? Yeah, it is. So I'll just explain something now, and then we'll make a short break, if that's okay. So we also mentioned how to write comments, right? And that's something your VS Code or whatever IDE you're using. Some of them might do that, some of them might not. But if they are good, they should do that. So whenever you write these comments, so now it's already auto-completing. Now if I press enter at this point, right here, everything happened by itself. Now you have to do that at the beginning, like if you do it up here, nothing will happen, I think, right? Oh, it still does, okay. But if there would be some var testing equals true, I think this should not work now. Maybe it does. Oh, come on. Yeah, now it does not do all that, but the idea is to start writing the comment right before the function, right here. Not this one. So now, this is basically documentation for our functions. So because we wrote the comment right before the function, it already printed out like at parent and then a star bought candies. And bought candies was exactly the name we gave there. So now in here we can use this to tell people what this function is about. So parent is short for parameter. And now we can say, okay, bought candies has to be with numbers instead of strings, let's say. So we can say number, oh, come on, not like that. And then we can say array of numbers. And then this checks if user can buy more candies. And something, it didn't do it for us, but we can try to do it. And this does not interfere with your code at all. This doesn't change anything on your function. It still runs as normal. This is just to tell other people. Okay, this requires a parameter of numbers called what candies, and it's an array of numbers, and it returns a boolean. And this is just a short description of what it does. And again, this is for you also to document your own code, because honestly, if you look at it in a few months, you might not remember what it does.
Yeah.
That happens every week for me. I look at my code and I remember what I did.
And also for others who want to help you.
Especially for others.
Yeah.
There is one of those like very nice quotes online that good developers make code that they understand. Very good developers make code that others understand. And that's what's more important. It's other people look at your code and they're like, I know what to change. I understand what you try to do here. And comments, again, comments is a way of explaining. But there is also yeah, the name of the variables is also important. But for instance, going back to this function here we saw, and I can actually just show you here this, yeah, let's say any, because it is any. And this calculates length array. Oop, not, sorry. So now, in here, it took me 2 lines to explain 1 line, right?
Yeah.
That's why I consider this bad. If the comments are bigger than your function, then there's something wrong with your code. Because the text should not be longer than the actual code. The text should be a short help to understand what's going on after this comment. And that's why I'm saying that this is completely useless function. You should not do it if it's that small. If we need more code more text to explain the code, then we should either not have the text or not have the code.
Yeah.
That's why, again, in here it makes sense because it's a bit more complex. There is a for loop, there is if, there is whatever. Somebody opens the code and they say checks if user can buy more candies. Just by that, people can understand already what it does, and then returns a boolean and asks for an array of numbers. There's nothing else I need to know about this code. I can just use this function for whatever I want. Oh, to calculate prices, of course. So yeah, this. I think now we should make a small break, and the homework is done now.